Yo, brothers and sisters, it's Video Ferox. This week we're bringing you the Pimp Mac Daddy attraction of Candy Tangerine Man, John Daniels at his best, Pimp Mac Daddy style. So why don't you check out the trailer and we'll be right back. Solid. Can you dig it?
Get back, Jack, and step aside. He's the baddest mother in 75.
How'd you like to make $20,000?
Hang on, baby, if you can. You're going for a ride with the Candy Tangerine Man.
And that was the Candy Tangerine Man trailer from 1975, I think this was.
A lot of the big names came out between 73 and 75. After 75, it does start trailing off a bit.
Yeah, Shaft had already dropped, Superfly and had already dropped, so it was still, this was kind of almost at the apex of Blaxploitation movie.
But then that was kind of the end of the exploitation genre in general. The B-movie houses were closing. It was no longer possible to do your road show cheaply and efficiently. Go watch one of Corman's commentaries if you want to know about the fall of the B-movie industry.
So the Candy Tangerine Man is essentially the story of this pimp, Baron. And he is this South LA sort of, he's a pimp, basically. He has a stable of women. He's got a little bit of a heart of gold because we see a couple of developments with his character later on that's like, okay, you're not quite a bad dude, but he's still pretty much a bad dude. And for the first half hour, we get to know him in his pimp life. He runs around keeping tabs on a stable of women.
He's a businessman, and his business is sex, prostitution. He is the manager and director and chief finance officer and everything else for this business that doesn't have any books.
He's got his best friend, who is this kind of street thief sort of dude.
Kind of a fixer.
A fixer. Yeah, he kind of drops in and out of the story. He hangs out with the Baron. He points the Baron towards, hey, there's some new meat on the street. You want to go get the new meat? Because Baron likes to collect the young ladies. The nubile, fresh young ladies off the street.
So this one young Native American girl comes to town from someplace, and she's just right off the bat, like amid the sea of black and white women, she sticks out like a sore thumb, kind of exotic looking. And this pimp named Dusty, who runs this kind of pool hall looking place, he wants to get her turned out. And he says, I can make $10,000 on her. And he's about to put her on the street, but Baron gets wind of it and goes to assess her in Dusty's place to see what she's like. And he immediately sees her for what she is. She's basically a young woman who hasn't yet had any experience doing this sort of thing, and not for real, but she's almost there, and he's like, oh no, I can't let this happen.
That's his first moment of heart of goldness. Well, we find out here in a couple of seconds later, because he wagers, it's like, well, she's worth 10,000, pulls out a wad of 10,000, drops it on the table and says, okay, let's shoot some pool for her. Dusty absolutely just runs the table all the way up until the very end when he scratches. And he starts swearing at the cue ball and just going off at the motherfucker.
He blames the cue ball for being white.
yeah, he just can't accept the fact that he just pooched it. I mean, he blew it, he choked, and so he immediately starts getting his ire up, and you know this ain't going to go well when Baron walks out, because immediately Dusty's like, go get her back, to his henchmen, these Italian guys.
Let's talk about the true star of the movie. That car.
Oh my gosh. God. I love that car. That car is beautiful when you first see it. It's a night shot, so you can't quite get the color coding yet in the night shot. But here he is in this right-hand drive, and I just, wait, what is that? And my first thought was Bentley, but that's because I don't know my cars very well. And then it's just like, oh, shoot, that's a Rolls. That is a beautiful classic Rolls.
They picked it up for an absolute song. It was being sold on the UCLA campus for like $2,500, which, okay, was back in 1975 money. So it was a little more expensive.
It was pricey.
And then they got the custom paint job for $800, and that's what the name of the movie refers to. The Candy Tangerine Man points directly to the candy tangerine colored car.
Yeah, and I mean, for a right-hand drive, and I hate to say it, but the roles are reversed. My issue was a couple of times when he goes to Dusty's place, he parks out in the alley. I'm thinking, oh my God, why are you parking that beautiful car here in this crappy asshole LA back alley? Jesus, don't do that.
It doesn't belong here. Please. Please, please.
And the thing is, with all the people chasing after him, it was just a matter of time before, he circles the same tide pool endlessly, so people know where he's going to go. Eventually, they're going to find that car.
Baron has machine guns under the headlights and gets a chance to James Bond some motherfuckers and just with the front of it. Now, and then everybody was like acting really surprised that, wait a second, Baron has machine guns in his pimp blimp. Okay, either A, he's never used them before and now gets to deploy them, or B, nobody really noticed that he has machine guns in his Rolls.
There's effing LA, so whatevs.
Yeah, I'm kind of getting the impression he never had to use them before. I'm getting the impression that the movie is starting as the wheels are coming off. This is when he first starts running into he's got a business, he's beaten his way to the top. He didn't have to pull out big guns before this. Now he's having to pull out the big guns in order to save what he's got and save that suburban dream home.
Because what is happening is that you have the Italians and you've got Dusty the Pimp, and they're Faction A. And then you have Faction B, the Cops, played by George Buckflower in an actually first time I've ever seen this substantial role. The dude has lines. He's got like more than one scene. He's more than a drunk on a bench.
Yeah, I mean, no Marty McFly, no, zombies coming out of the fog to kill him. This is one of the few times I've seen him speak more than like 5 lines in a movie. I was like, oh, right on, Buck Flower.
And him and the chemistry they have between him and the other cop is brilliant. This movie doesn't have great lines, but it does have some really witty ones. Like, there's that one scene where they've had this car chase and the cops have crashed through this barrier and they're hanging off a cliff and they're teetering on the precipice. And Baron comes over and is like, boy, you guys are in a real pickle, aren't you? And they're like, yes, save us. And he's like, well, tell you what, give me some information. Where's the girl who ran off with my money? And I'll let you go. And Buck Flowers is like, yes, she's on Highway 101, and she's the only farm up there that's run by niggers. I meant blacks. Black people, not niggers. Blacks. And I'm like...
That's after his partner goes, you can't say niggers!
Yeah, you can't say that.
I was like, oh dear, this suddenly went over a cliff in the most real way.
Well, he lets them go in the Arnold Schwarzenegger sort of way.
Before Arnold, long before
Arnold did that. And so I liked moments like that where you developed the characters weirdly, but fun.
You watch this progression of these cops as well. What you've got at the beginning is a pair of assholes who are doing a hard job. They're going after a pimp. That's their job. It's very easy to see them as the villains in the piece because our protagonist is, of course, a pimp. But as the movie goes through, the racism comes more clearly. The whole they're on the take comes through more clearly. Mm-hmm. These are dirty racist assholes. But you don't see that right at the beginning. At the beginning, you just see something that's very typical for the 70s.
Yeah, and it sticks out like a sore thumb a little later because they start doubling down on everything they're doing because they're getting more exasperated because he keeps getting away. He does stuff that irks them because A, he's black, B, he's a pimp, C, he lives in the big city where there's lots of opportunity to collar these guys and they can't get him.
After dropping off the girl and after eluding the cops, he starts driving up into the Hollywood Hills and he pulls over and there's this other car sitting by the side of the road. And that's the bit of the movie I was like, wait, what the fuck's going on? Is he like trying to evade the police? No, he's just swapping out, takes off his pimp clothes and gets into his very pedestrian, very beater car and continues driving out to Suburbia. Apparently, there's this dichotomy of he's got his pimp world and he has his home life world, where he's got 2 kids, he's got a wife, he's got a white picket fence, he's got no busy neighbors. He is the American dream.
And it's kind of an interesting portrayal because he's a black man in the middle of a white neighborhood. Back in 1975, you had the beginnings of the desegregations of neighborhoods. There was still a lot of unofficial stuff that was going on. So this is kind of, he's got the American dream despite being a pimp.
Yeah, and this actually resonates with me because my aunt married a man in California and they moved up to Renton and Fairwood Green, very suburban, living on a cul-de-sac, very wide streets, very classy, and they transitioned into that lifestyle. So when I see this, I'm thinking, this is kind of low rent compared to where they moved up in Fairwood Green, but it's still the respectable tract housing type of thing, the kind of white flight post-World War II era, where the whites moved out of town and the blacks stayed and festered in the inner city neighborhoods like Watts or like Harlem or something like that. And
it's not very upscale, but it is very above the station of what you usually get in these sort of movies.
And clearly the pimp money is paying off because I very seriously doubt that if the situation had been much different, if he'd been working for like the airline industry, that he would have been able to get a house like this mainly because of redlining, where a lot of the blacks were corralled into certain neighborhoods and low interest rates were given to whites for a neighborhood like this. So he's definitely made it, at least the neighbors think. They don't know where he gets his money from because he lies.
And the movie at this point can diverge into 2 different directions. The direction that it went, that the movie follows, is that it's a confrontation with Dusty and the Italians and the 2 cops and them infringing on the Baron's organization and basically trying to take him out. The direction I would have liked to have seen the movie go is the other way, where you have his pimp life and his suburban life kind of bleeding into each other and playing against each other. You don't really get a lot of suburban lifestyle in these sorts of movies, so I would have liked to have seen those 2 at war with each other.
The only problem with that is you have to be very skilled as a writer and as a director to pull that off. It's much easier to do if there was a novelization of this. I can really see that playing out because you can see the characters' thoughts and you have more chance for those subtle near misses, or that somebody makes the realization and he somehow manages to turn them off from the realization. It's hard to do in a movie.
Yeah, and it doesn't feel like 2 different movies, but it almost could be. I mean, if they'd had the bleed through from one place to the other, putting the family in danger because of the pimp lifestyle, kind of like how superheroes, some of them have an alternate identity to protect their families, I could see this being in the realm of psychodrama than revenge flick if something typical happened, like they found out where his family is and they kidnapped somebody or all the family, and then he's got to go into the lion's mouth, as it were, and get the family back from these assholes.
But the closest we get is Mrs. Kravitz, the neighbor. She spots Baron downtown in the pimp mobile with his pimp clothes on, and she's all like, is that my neighbor? No, it can't possibly be my neighbor. And that's as close that the pimp life and suburban life come to overlapping. And that's a damn shame. That's a missed opportunity, I think.
And to be fair, this was John Daniels' first movie or so, at least his first starring role. And before this, he was a music producer and a singer. So he's kind of coming at it at a disad, but at the same time, he's given a good account for himself. And I think that he was getting better as he went along. Unfortunately, his acting career was kind of short because he went back to producing and singing afterward, and he's to this day still producing jazz and stuff like that.
So let's talk about the music, because I fucking loved the music in this thing, and I wanted to get what you guys thought about it.
I liked it. I mean, it was typical of the time. A lot of the tropes that you get of black music, a lot of the waka chicka kind of stuff that you always get, very orchestral, not something that was done on, it was probably done on the cheap, but they made very good, with what they had.
Apparently, this was a group associated with Barry White. So it was, I don't know how much influence he had on the soundtrack, but you can definitely tell it had that very almost Earth, Wind, and Fire, lots of brassy horns sound to it. I really liked that aspect of it.
I really liked that, unlike a lot of B-list movies or movies that never made it to your premiere theaters. The music didn't ever overwhelm. They didn't use the music to hide the fact that they got a shit sound take. And so they just threw on the loudest music, overwhelming music, and tried to pound the hell out of whatever background sound that they didn't want you to hear. The music complemented everything. And yeah, it did have its humor moments and things like that. It went with it instead of just kind of being overlaid over the top of whatever was going on.
And it was just cool, funky, fresh sound. I liked it.
Yeah, it wasn't like Music Salad, where in this type of movies where you generally have like a bass, bongos, a flute, and then some horns and stuff, and kind of the general, and then a regular guitar. It's kind of the general sound that they always wanted to have a slight jungle sound to it with the bongos or whatever, kind of that continental Africa wannabe kind of music, and they didn't overload this movie with that kind of music, which I found really nice.
One of the problems with the movie is that the writing does get a little wobbly at the end. Like, the pride thing, the whole motivation of the secretary. There's also the bit like, where do the bonds come from? Okay, now Baron's good friend it has been a street.
He's a window man. He's not a smash and grab. He's a window man. He's a sneak into the unlocked window, rifle the house, sneak back out.
The movie isn't very clear on what he's doing, where the bonds come from, the motivation of the secretary, that sort of thing.
I wondered if the script was bigger or if they'd shot more for it and cut it out for final cut, and they locked the picture and then realized later, we should have left that in. They might have shot him breaking in.
And it also might be an artifact of the print in that the only real, the best print of the movie that remains is a little dubious and is missing bits. So there's like one scene, this one fight scene where this guy's on top of the stairs and then like instantly jump cuts to like down below. And that's just because the footage is missing from the print. So maybe there's a little bit of that in there too.
Or it might be just a case of bad writing. I have read more than one book where the author brings something in and you can tell that the author obviously had this background in mind and they just forgot to write it.
Or just simply the coda of the movie. So you've got Baron's friend who delivers the bonds, but then gets killed by the Italians. Or so we think. And then at the very end of the movie, after the Baron gets out of his pimp lifestyle and leaves his that world behind him, we cut to the pimp blimp driving up, and the camera, we see the person driving behind, and it turns out that it's his friend, or so we think. Now, you think that it might have been
Dusty. It's one of those, at that time, I wasn't paying as much attention as I should have. And I thought, shit, did Dusty move up and get subtle?
But to be fair, the movie and the end of the movie isn't very clear. So it might have been Dusty, it might have been his friend, because the coda was shot after the fact. Mm-hmm. So the movie wasn't intended to have this Dread Pirate Roberts thing where, okay, the Candy Tangerine Man gives his clothes and his pimp blimp to another worthy successor who then makes his money pimping while he goes and retires. That was a last minute addition.
Another point of writing on the movie, you've got this flavor throughout the movie of it doesn't quite go all the way down into goofy, but it never quite goes into this hardcore serious.
The movie is light, if not necessarily camp.
Yeah. And then you've got this one scene that just goes into intensity that is hard to watch. The Italians come in, they're out to take out the Baron. They've decided, the wheels have been falling off his enterprise for a little while, in part thanks to the Italians. And then the cops, what they've been doing, have been cutting into his business. And then we get to this scene where the girls are just sitting there bullshitting, saying, hey, I don't have to spread my legs tonight. Yay, I need a night off. What are you planning on doing? I'm thinking of going to see that movie kind of thing, doing their nails and all that thing. And these guys bust in, and it just gets serious from there.
Because the Italians, they're all like, you come over here, and they grab her, rip off her top, and get out this big knife and start, we're going to send a message to the Baron and start carving off her titties. The camera pans up as they're raping her. So the camera pans up and you don't actually see it, but you hear her screaming. And you see the reaction shots of all the other people in the room, including the one person on the bad guy team who is kind of looking down like, oh man, this is going a little too far. Oh shit. But everybody else is like, yeah.
They managed to portray so clearly what is being done to this girl without showing it.
And it is such a tonal dissonance from the rest of the movie, which is all of a sudden you're just like, wait, what the fuck is going on? This really dark, heavy scene comes out of nowhere. So yeah, I can kind of see your point of the, that gives me this heebie-jeebies.
And it's really effective because it's out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not that the intention's out of nowhere, but just the act is out of nowhere.
Yeah, and then the rest of the fights in the rest of the movies does not come back to this tone, ever.
So it's just this one spike of, wow.
And I must say that I do like a lot of the framing for a lot of these shots, and it's very cinematic as opposed to looking like something that was maybe shot for TV on a TV scale but put in a movie theater.
Well, there was that one scene where Baron is driving and he's on his phone, and the camera is up and above his shoulder, and you can tell he's driving and you can tell the car is moving. And obviously what they did was just had some dude in the back seat hanging out the suicide door, looking down with the camera, or hanging onto the top of the car. I'm like, yikes, that's really creative and also dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there was a lot of good cinematography there. Okay, 70s had some really experimental stuff, which I mostly hated. But this just had some good creativity in it and how they shot it. They're down the slow motion fight scene.
Oh, yeah.
That slow motion fight scene was beautifully shot. There's a takeaway of the bad special effects. They didn't have much of a budget. It showed in what they used for blood and the squibs. But if you were to replace those with good special effects, that would have been an awesome.
That's the problem with the slow motion, is it takes away the smoke and mirrors that allow you to hide things. So you could clearly see, in the few moments before the squib goes off there, yep, there's a squib right there under his chest. Oh, it just went off. Okay, we saw that. It was very clearly, okay, I'm going to hit you, but I'm nowhere near you. It shows off those flaws.
I mean, a lot of the time in shots like that or scenes like that where you've got limited money, you have a choreographer who may do this part-time or something, and you have to rely on pure creativity because you're lacking money to do stuff on a spectacular level, like, say, Enter the Dragon, as opposed to, Black Belt Jones, which had a smaller budget, but the fight scenes were just as good because of the quality of the actor.
So, mi amigos, any final thoughts on the Candy Tangerine Man, or should we just
I enjoyed that movie. When I was looking at the description of it, I thought, oh, this is going to be the stereotype. This is going to be the epitome of the blaxploitation genre. And when we got to it and started watching it, it was more. It had a lot of those elements in it. It had a lot of very distinctly blaxploitation elements, but then it had something more which elevated it to its own level.
Alrighty then. I guess that's a big bite of candy.
Okay, then.
All right, Ashley. Being that this was your pick, I'm going to go with you first. Did you like Candy Tangerine Man?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I figured that it might be a typical run-of-the-mill movie that you might find on like a 10 blaxploitation movie DVD set, but this one seemed to have just a bit more meat to it. You know, something I could really just grab onto in terms of originality. And so, for those reasons of the flipping the plot of a pimp kind of sideways, of the dichotomy between the home life and pimping in secret, and then the action, and then John Daniels kind of starting his acting career, which was pretty short by most standards. I liked it.
There are some flaws in it, yeah, as you mentioned. It's got some rough spots. They were very obviously constrained by budget, but it was well acted, well written, well played, and very well directed and shot. I'm kind of impressed with some of the cinematography they've got going.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the movie. I liked Superfly and The Mac better as far as like pimping movies go, but I think this was a very solid, well-constructed, well-paced, everything about the movie just fired for me on all cylinders.
Candy Tangerine Man was on my list of potential picks. When I was looking at it, it was so typical of the era. And watching it, not only was it typical of the era, but it was highly enjoyable.
Whatever. Okay, that sounds like a good episode. We're done. Fine. I got no outro on this damn thing. Cut the credits. All right.
That work?
Yeah, sure. All right.
Oh boy, Ben Orange.
All right, brothers and sisters, we're wrapping up Blaxploitation History Month next week with Three the Hard Way, Jim Kelly, Fred Williamson, Jim Brown, as they take it to the Nazi-type man. All right, can you dig it? If you like what you saw here, why don't you fire us off an email at thevideonastyproject@gmail.com, and we'll be coming right at you. Boom. Can you dig it?